Baldur's Gate 3 is a game that needs no introduction, but for anyone who's been living under a rock, it has quickly become one of the highest reviewed role-playing games of all time, earning praise and awards for its gripping narrative, beloved characters, and the seemingly unlimited freedom players have when tackling puzzles and combat. Even after pouring hundreds of hours into saving Faerûn, many of us are still feeling that itch to immerse ourselves in a fantasy world of elves, dwarves, and gelatinous polyhedrons. Fortunately, RPGs are one of the oldest genres in all of gaming, dating back all the way to the 70s when pen and paper games were first adapted to computers. With such a vast and storied heritage, fans are spoiled for choice when looking to satisfy that desire with a glut of excellent fantasy RPGs available across many platforms. But for your benefit, we have scoured the dusty tomes and plundered the darkest corners of our game libraries to bring you some of the best. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are 10 fantastic sword and sorcery RPGs to play after Baldur's Gate 3. Number 10. Ultima 3 Exodus. RPGs can be divided into many different subgenres: ARPGs, DRPGs, JRPGs, and you don't even want to know what a QRPG is. Let me tell you. Baldur's Gate and games of its ilk are generally labelled as CRPGs, or computer role-playing games, due to their roots in PC gaming, and any talk about the history of CRPGs would be incomplete without talking about Ultima. Beginning as a passion project of game designer Richard Garriott, the Ultima series follows the adventures of the Stranger, a denizen of Earth who is summoned to the world of Sosaria to combat the forces of evil. In Ultima 3, this evil takes the form of Exodus, an entity that appears to be some sort of demonic computer, and it's up to the Stranger and his companions to defeat it. Ultima 3 was truly a landmark game, introducing or refining many concepts that would become staples of most RPGs to follow. Tiled graphics, fast travel, customizable parties, and a larger focus on storytelling, just to name a few. It would serve as a direct inspiration for games like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, as well as fueling protests over the supposedly satanic nature of RPGs thanks to its box art. Truly historic and iconic. Number 9. Arx Fatalis. For a bit of a change of pace, our next entry is going to be about a different type of RPG, specifically a first-person action RPG from Bethesda featuring combat, stealth, and spellcasting, and no, it's not Elder Scrolls. Arx Fatalis was the first project from Arcane Studios, future creators of the Dishonored series, and takes place in a setting where the sun has died, forcing all the world's many races, including humans, dwarves, rat men, and snake women alike, to retreat underground. The customizable main character of the game wakes up in a prison cell with no memory of their past and must escape to pursue their adventures. And no, it's still not the Elder Scrolls. Arx Fatalis eschews the forests and castles of other RPGs and instead confines the player to subterranean caverns, a choice that leads to one of the most atmospheric dungeon crawling experiences out there. It also features a unique magic system, wherein the player must replicate certain gestures with the mouse in order to perform the necessary incantations to cast a spell. Critics praised the game for its visuals and gameplay, though commercially it was considered a failure. Perhaps the fact that it released only a month after The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind had something to do with it. Oh, Arx Fatalis. If only you were The Elder Scrolls. Number 8. Might and Magic 6 The Mandate of Heaven. Hey, you got your science fiction in my fantasy, how very dare you! When it comes to mixing two great tastes that are great together, look no further than Might and Magic. Since the mid-80s, the series has been serving up fantasy RPG goodness in one form or another, and while you really can't go wrong with any installment, the 6th is certainly one of the best. Mandate of Heaven begins on the world of Enroth as it's invaded by a race of aliens known as Kriegans who defeat the king's forces and take him captive, plunging the land into chaos. And as always seems to be the way with these things, the fate of the world rests in the hands of 4 brave adventurers from a small village. The title made a number of overhauls to the franchise's traditional gameplay, being the first installment to feature 3D graphics and replacing the restricted navigation system with free movement and exploration. Mandate of Heaven saw much praise for its character creation and customization systems, giving players a much greater degree of freedom in crafting their parties than ever before. Despite this reception, Might and Magic 6 would just barely lose out on being called the best RPG of 1998. Instead, that title went to none other than Baldur's Gate. How about that? Number 7. Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning. It's always exciting to see the formation of a supergroup when talented individuals with established careers come together to make new music. Except in this case, when we say music, we actually mean fantasy lore about elves and magic. Rock on, baby! Kingdoms of Amalur was set to be a new franchise produced by 38 studios, and it would all begin with a reckoning. Helmed by creator of Spawn Todd McFarlane as art director, creator of Drizzt Do'Urden R.A. Salvatore as lead writer, and creator of the DK rap Grant Kirkhope as the composer, Reckoning is the story of the Fateless One, an adventurer who has returned from the dead and thus been freed from the threads of destiny, and their quest to end the war against an army of evil immortals. On paper, it's a winning formula, and is surprisingly just as good in execution, with rich, expertly crafted lore and character writing serving as the backdrop for fast-paced, real-time combat with deep skill trees. While Reckoning sadly failed to attract the sales needed to continue the franchise, it was highly regarded by fans and critics and eventually got a remaster with the catchy new subtitle, Re-Reckoning. Now available to a new generation of RPG fans, the Kingdoms of Amalur are a world that is more than worth exploring. And also worth exploring is the Wikipedia page for that game. The development was crazy. Moving on. Number 6. Wizardry 8. In its early days, the CRPG genre was held up by 3 pillars. The first 2 were Might and Magic and Ultima, both of which we've already talked about in this list already, but the third and perhaps most important of them all was Wizardry. Wizardry was the original pioneer of role-playing games on the PC and introduced many things that we now take for granted in the genre, including such mind-blowing innovations as multi-character adventuring parties and graphics. The series has a very long history with many great games, but its final main series installment, Wizardry 8, may be one of the best for its robust character creation and modernized gameplay features. With 6 characters to create using a wide assortment of races and classes, and the option to import characters from Wizardry 7, the sky's the limit for possible party compositions. Wizardry 8 was well received by critics, and even today is considered one of the greatest RPGs of all time, but sadly, it would prove to be the last installment in the series. Unless, of course, you live in Japan, where the Wizardry series has spawned no fewer than 39 different spin-off games across 5 distinct subgenres. Even more than 2 decades after Wizardry 8, this pillar continues to stand strong. Number 5. Realms of Arcania, Star Trail. Part of what makes Baldur's Gate so Baldur's great is that it draws upon the established rule set used by Dungeons & Dragons, which provides an excellent backbone around which to construct a video game. Fortunately for the competition, D&D is not the only tabletop game in town. Realms of Arcania is a trilogy of RPGs based on the tabletop system The Dark Eye, originally a German publication that has actually outsold Dungeons & Dragons in its home country, and the second installment, Star Trail, is widely considered its best. It plays things rather traditionally with its gameplay, but it does it all very well and leaned into the complexities of the genre at a time when many of its competitors were looking to simplify. Star Trail is not a game for the faint of heart, however, as it provides an utterly daunting number of features for players to micromanage, something that might terrify newcomers to the genre, but for those players who delight in crunching numbers and feel that 8 different types of wizard just isn't enough options, Star Trail might be worth a look. Just know that it's best to stay away from the remake if you can. Number 4. Severance Blade of Darkness. The late 90s and early 2000s were a good time to be an RPG fan, as evidenced by many of the previous entries on this list. But one hidden gem that slipped through the cracks for many was 2001's Severance Blade of Darkness. Not based on any established setting, but drawing much inspiration from classic sword and sorcery tales like Conan the Barbarian, Severance follows 4 mighty heroes, each on their own quest to obtain a legendary sword and slay the necromancer threatening to shroud the world in darkness. Not a particularly complicated plot as RPGs go, but the real meat of Severance is in its gameplay. Each character can wield multiple weapons and unlock an arsenal of bone-crunching and limb-severing attacks for use against the waves of enemies they'll be faced with. The game also includes a level editor, meaning that fan-made levels and mods existed in abundance, or would have if the game hadn't sold far below expectations, relegating it to cult classic status. Fortunately, recent years have been kind to Severance, as HD ports have been released for modern consoles and allowed the game to receive a fresh appraisal from a new audience, many of whom now see the game as a precursor to the Dark Souls series for its combat mechanics and extreme difficulty. Now that's what I call a good Severance package. Number 3. Divinity Original Sin 2. Larian Studios, the developers of Baldur's Gate 3, must be staffed by actual wizards considering the amount of content and continued support they've managed to conjure up for such a beefy game. And the real miracle is that they've managed to do it not once, but twice. Divinity Original Sin 2 is the sequel to a spin-off of the Divinity series, but has risen in prominence to eclipse any game that came before. In the land of Rivellon, those who can manipulate the mysterious energy known as Source are persecuted and imprisoned, and players take on the role of one of these so-called sorcerers as they seek to defeat the one behind it all. It doesn't take long to see the roots of Baldur's Gate 3 in Original Sin 2. Players can make their own character or choose from a number of pre-made ones with unique backstories and customize their party with a wide array of classes and skills. Explore alone or as a group, interact with the environment, grow closer to your allies as you adventure, and yes, even talk to animals. It's lacking a bit of the polish found in the studio's later efforts, but even so, Original Sin 2 remains a more than worthy endeavor in its own right. Number 2. Betrayal at Krondor. Many of the best fantasy movies of all time are based on books, and it may be the same case when it comes to video games. For example, take Betrayal at Krondor, based on the Rift War series by Raymond E. Feist, and widely considered to be one of the best RPGs of its era. Interestingly, Feist himself had little to do with the game's production or writing, but even so, Betrayal at Krondor takes advantage of its licensed pedigree by setting itself firmly within the Rift War continuity, following up on the events of previously published books, and eventually being set in stone as canon when Feist adapted the game's plot into a new novel. Published by Sierra, the creators of King's Quest and other classics, Betrayal at Krondor blends point-and-click gameplay with strategic, grid-based combat. Players are free to explore the mostly open world within each chapter, battling enemies and shopping for items, but what sets Betrayal apart from its contemporaries is its level of immersion. Players will have to tend to their weapons and armor and keep their party well fed with food and drink. Upon release, Betrayal at Krondor was lauded for its fully realized world, combat system, and complex puzzle-solving challenges, and was a regular fixture atop Game of the Year lists for 1993. Number 1. Pillars of Eternity. Baldur's Gate is far from the only video game series to be based on a Dungeons & Dragons setting. Games like the Icewind Dale series and Planescape Torment have also proven to be quite popular with fans, including much debate over which is the best. Many efforts have been made to recapture the success of these classics, but few have come as close as Pillars of Eternity. Developed by Obsidian Entertainment, the same studio that gave us Fallout New Vegas and South Park The Stick of Truth, Pillars of Eternity establishes its own setting in which the player character can see the souls and past lives of other creatures, and with these powers sets out to discover why the children of their homeland are being born without souls. Pillars of Eternity takes many cues from those classic D&D computer games with its class system and role-playing mechanics, but also expands upon its unique setting and lore with fresh ideas and superb execution that led to a warm reception from fans and seemingly heralded a return to form for the CRPG genre, a return that has now culminated with Baldur's Gate 3. With all this and more, Pillars of Eternity is one series that we hope sticks around for, well, eternity is a bit much for anyone, but at least for a very long time.